After Jesus had told this story about the Good Samaritan, he was invited over to a Pharisee's house for dinner. But this was not a friendly invitation because the Pharisees really hated Jesus and they were always trying to trap him and get him on something where they could arrest him. And they never could. So at this dinner, Jesus was invited to a Pharisee's house, and they even had lawyers, Pharisaical lawyers in there, trying to trap him in something. And they ate dinner, but a crowd again had gathered to see what was going to happen, why Jesus was invited into the house of a Pharisee in the first place. Some of these friends that were watching from outside were his friends, were friends of Jesus. So anyway, when the dinner was over, they began to ask questions of Jesus. And Jesus said, I noticed something at the dinner tonight when you invited the people in. He said to this Pharisee that held the dinner, he said, they were all scrambling to get to the best seat in the house. They wanted to have their status be known. If you had name tags or nameplates or something, they wanted to be number one next to the man that was hosting the meal. And he said, this is not a good attitude to have at all. And he noticed that one of the men who was standing kind of outside and was watching what was going on in the house, because they knew that they really had Jesus because they wanted him to be on trial in the house. And he invited this one man in, and the Bible calls it dropsy. He was sick with dropsy. Today they would call that edema. I looked it up, and it's a terrible swelling of the legs and the limbs. But I have seen people that just can hardly walk. Their legs are so terribly swollen and makes their feet look small. But it's a really bad condition. It's an edema that can come from heart failure or something wrong with your adrenal glands. And this man that was outside of the dinner party that was watching had this terrible problem. He could hardly walk. His poor legs were so swollen. These are stories you usually don't hear about, but it's in Scripture. Jesus invited him in, and everybody inside, the Pharisees and the lawyers, were like, you're asking this man to come into our meal? And Jesus immediately touched the man and said, I see your faith, you've been healed. And the man was completely healed after that. And then they started to once again attack Jesus for healing on the Sabbath day. Even though they prepared dinner, that's work, isn't it? But it's always Jesus' fault when he does something compassionate or has healing going on. And once again, Jesus said, what if something happened to, say your child has a little pet or you have an animal? Don't you have compassion if that animal, and he used this illustration before with him, said if he fell in a well, the animal, wouldn't you want to rescue it, or would you wait until the Sabbath is over? Where, for goodness sakes, is your compassion, Jesus said. And they were kind of taken back by that Jesus would be so bold as to tell him something like that. So Jesus is not popular. And then a lot of them started to take offense at Jesus quite a bit, and a lot of them went home. And Jesus said to the Pharisee that was having the dinner, "Why don't you go out now and invite all the people that are homeless, that could use a good meal? Why don't you invite people who have needs, who would like a little bit of girth from a good meal?" And they didn't like that either. Jesus said, "That's the people that you should be inviting to the meal." But he really was the winner at that trial meal that they had, because he put them to shame, something fierce. And so Jesus was always compassionate, and he gave them a good lesson on compassion. And those awful Pharisees are his bitter enemies, always trying to trap Jesus. So I'm going to leave off there for right now. I've used up enough time, but we'll continue this saga in the next story. Thanks. Bye-bye.